Okay, I'll call the meeting to order of the Roads Education Organization doing business as Pivot Charter Schools. It's 9:03 a.m. Roll call, Liz.
All right. Let's see. Secretary Halverson.
Here.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Harrigan. Kevin Harrigan, are you on the line? I think he's here, but he might need to be sorting out audio. Board Member Holmes is absent. Chairman Lewis?
Oh, I'm here.
Is present. Board Member Pat Martell?
Present.
Thank you. Let's see, Board Member Steve Siegel is absent. And Board Member OJ Sutherland?
Here.
Is present. And then Vice Chairman Harrigan, are you present on the call?
Strange, he has an open line. Board Member Holmes was having a hard time getting in, so I'm.
Jim,
Oh, you made it. Okay.
Oh, good.
I was just sending you a draft. You have the phone number. Great.
Okay, so Member Holmes is present after all. Excellent.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any modifications to the agenda?
Liz.
Oh, wait. I hear Dr. Harrigan. There's a lot of echo, but it sounds like he is present.
Okay. Are there any modifications to the agenda from the staff?
Liz, I'm present on the phone.
Okay, sounds good. We can hear you on the phone, Kevin. Thank you. Oh, and actually, Board Member Steve Siegel is joining right now.
Great. Okay, then we have everybody. Excellent. Record reflect all in attendance. Good morning, Board Member Siegel. Nice to have you on the call. Okay, again, are there any modifications to the agenda? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
Halverson moves.
Moved by
Martell,
Halverson.
second.
Second by
Martell,
Martell.
second.
Martell, second. Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the agenda is approved. We'll move on to public comment. This is the time and place reserved for citizens, employees, and representatives of school groups to address the board on items not on the agenda. While the board cannot take action upon or discuss items that are not on the approved agenda, but welcomes your comments. Persons addressing the board are asked to state their names and whether or not they are a resident of the district. The board chair reserves the right to limit comments from the public as well as the amount of time spent on any one topic. Are there any members of the public that wish to address the board at any of our sites this morning?
And I'm seeing none in the chat either, and no one has.
We're trying to be extra gracious with audio these days. Make sure everybody has time. Okay, hearing none, we will close public comment and move to item 3, reports and presentations to the board. Our first is Liz, our Chief Business Officer, our financial update.
Excellent, great. And can you see my screen? Have you been able to see the agenda up a moment ago and now the
Yes.
slides?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so if you recall, in August at our meeting, we had a lot of updates about the state budget. So one of the main things I just wanted to point out today is now we have a lot of updates to the expense side of the budget now that we've had some time to sort out all of those changes that were made recently. So we'll first do a quick recap of the fiscal year which has recently ended, 2019-20, and talk about the unaudited actuals and the audit process, and then as well as a revised forecast for the current school year 2020-21, including our cash forecast and possible needs for this year in that regard. Okay, so our fiscal year, which has recently ended, our books are closed, our unaudited actuals have been submitted, and we did see the operating incomes and our net positions increase it looked a lot better than we thought it would when COVID first hit. And some of that is, I'll go into some details in a moment about what make up this increase, but we ended up actually with quite a strong year in terms of operating income. So our actual operating income, according to our unaudited actuals, outperformed the approved budget as well as the previous forecast, which had been presented in June. So we're ending strong with an operating income of about $500,000. The way that breaks down by site, all the sites improved, with the 3 smaller schools being fairly close to break even, which, considering COVID and all of the sort of craziness that happened, and with ADA and everything like that, actually quite happy with that. And then North Bay actually had ended up with a large surplus. And so some of the factors contributing to this, obviously there are a lot of things related to COVID, and particularly with respect to closing our resource centers. So our travel costs went way down for our administrators who travel from site to site, travel for professional development, all kinds of travel and things like field trips that are kind of in person that we had to kind of stop, in terms of the public health restrictions and closing the resource centers. Also things like office supplies and utilities, with the resource centers closed down, though we saw a lot of savings there as well. Board meeting travel, since all of our board meetings were held via teleconference since the shutdown. So that's kind of, a sampling. Obviously there were costs that increased due to COVID, but some of those have also been a little bit delayed due to supply issues. So for example, we ordered about $30,000 worth of Chromebooks, which still have not come in. So we still have not been billed for them. So we expected that to originally be in the 2019-20 fiscal year, but because of the supply issues we had been experiencing, that actually will end up hitting the books this year. Hopefully we will get those soon. So one other big thing you'll notice here is the LCFF, the J13A approval at Pivot North Bay. That's related to the fire that was in October, November 2019, the Kincaid fire. And we weren't quite sure how much of our initial request would be approved by the CDE. So we had a very conservative forecast for that, but they ended up approving everything that we had requested. So that was a nice healthy boost to LCFF. Okay, any questions on those changes? And the unaudited actual.
Just curious, Liz, do we have an update on those Chromebooks?
Sadly, no.
Okay.
They're being very hesitant to commit to a date, and partially because of their own supply issues. They'll order a certain number of devices from the manufacturer, but then when the shipment comes in, it's a lot less than they had actually ordered. So they're experiencing, sort of the same thing on the supply end. But the last I heard, it was supposed to be early October, tentatively, hopefully. Hopefully.
It's supposed to be early May, but okay. Thank you.
We ordered. We
all know it's not. We all know it's not your fault, and the teachers and staff do too. But it's just frustrating.
Yeah, and at least we do have the devices that that were used at the resource centers. That we can now, we've been issuing those as sort of loaner devices to students and families, and so at least those are not just sitting there in the resource centers, obviously. So we have things that we can use in the meantime.
Great, thank you, Liz.
Okay, so at the end of year, June 30th, a quick review of the balance sheet. So in terms of our ending fund balance and net position, so we had a fairly healthy cash balance, and as well as obviously some accrued accounts receivable and things like that, and fixed assets that are depreciating. And overall, after you add in the liabilities, our ending fund balance was about $2.29 million, which was quite healthy. And so it ended up being 28.34% of our 1920 expense. So audit process, we're working with our auditors right now to review the financial data and everything that we had included in the unaudited actuals and once the books were closed. So we should be seeing a draft report in November, and then the board will review and accept the report. As usual, the audit timeline, as far as I'm aware, is still December 15th. There have not been any delays or extensions granted due to COVID, as far as I'm aware. Okay, any questions about 1920 before we move on to the current fiscal year? Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Liz. I had a question about the PPP again.
Sure.
On that slide that was reflected in cash and long-term liabilities. So in light of the school deferrals and everything else, it seemed that the board made a wise decision using the PPP for our resources, and that will be completely within the requirements set by the Treasury, correct?
Yes. So we will talk about PPP a little bit more coming up in terms of impact to this year. But yes, at this point, the PPP on the balance sheet here is reflected as a loan. So, it kind of contributes to part of our cash balance, but then also liabilities. Yes, and I do think we were wise to obtain it, and we have needed it
Great.
already. So
Thank you.
Any other questions about 2019-20? Okay, moving on to this year. So I'll go quickly through this part. We already did a pretty thorough recap at the August meeting of the state budget. But the main things that are new compared to the adopted budget from June is that the large cut to LCFF was eliminated. So we have been quote unquote made whole in terms of the funding levels. However, the ADA, as you know, is essentially capped for us at the same level that we had last year, reported for P2 in 2019-20. There was sort of a follow-up, a cleanup, that would make some exceptions for, for certain schools, but non-classroom based schools like Pivot have been excluded from that. So we are still subject to the cap of our ADA from last year. We did receive some.
Can I ask a question? Maybe it's for Jana. Is anything happening with that particular weirdness on the ADA? When there's a lawsuit or maybe a lawsuit or something or other?
Nothing has changed as far as our cap is concerned at this point in time, no.
Yep.
Okay. We did also receive some learning loss mitigation funds, which was excellent. In the beginning, we weren't sure if those would also exclude non-classroom based schools, because that seems to be kind of a trend that's happening right now at the state level, is they're excluding non-classroom based schools from a lot of kind of things. So it was nice to at least be included in certain portions of those learning loss mitigation funds, because we definitely do have costs related to responding to COVID. So I was pleased to see the state acknowledge that. There are some restrictions and things for instructional days and distance learning. A lot of that doesn't apply to us because we are already non-classroom based school, but there are certain things that do, as you'll see in the learning continuity plan, which we will discuss later today. This is the same slide from August as well. It just shows that our original budget, we had planned for an increase of ADA, but due to the state budget now, we have to decrease that ADA forecast by about 29, and this is how it breaks down across the sites. So all of that had contributed to sort of the revenue side changes, and now we have incorporated a lot more of the expense side changes, such as the staffing and compensation plan, which the board approved in August, and some other expense projections that we've seen based on the actuals and kind of what's shaken out so far in this school year. So all in all, our operating income pivot-wide is still healthy at this point at $291,000. But as we know, things are changing due to COVID, and we have a lot of question marks. So we will obviously keep you apprised of any major changes as those come up. And how this breaks down by site, one thing that I'm actually very pleased about is the two smaller Southern California schools, San Diego and Riverside, after all the updates on the expense side are now roughly break even, slightly positive, which is definitely an improvement. In our board adopted budget, we had kind of braced for a difficult year at the smaller sites, especially due to COVID. And so we had projected a negative operating income at both of those sites. So I'm very happy to see it now kind of, break even or at least slightly positive. So that's definitely an improvement. North Valley is still a little bit negative, and I'll go into a little detail about that on a later slide about one of the primary drivers of that, but it's still fairly close to break even. And North Bay now has a healthy surplus.
I'm particularly pleased to see it at Riverside with the extensive tenant improvements that we're doing on our new facility and the delays that have occurred. So I was really pleased to see that. Woohoo!
Yes, definitely. Okay, so here are a few notes about our current forecast. As you know, Jana has been, and Jana and I have been working with a consultant regarding the career technical education grants. But at this point, we're just, sort of at the application stage. So we have not actually included any revenues or additional expenses in the forecast because it's unknown. With some of the grants that we're applying for, the amount you receive is sort of based on the applicant pool. So depending on if other LEAs are applying or not, the amount that we could be awarded varies quite a bit. So we didn't want to kind of commit to any forecast until we have a little bit more information about that. I think the application was just submitted like last Thursday or something. So we'll update you when we have more information about that. North Valley has an interesting situation with depreciation, and it has to do with the fact that depreciation schedules cannot extend past the end date of a facility's lease. So this is our auditors have advised us on our depreciation schedule for some of the improvements that we had made at North Valley, and basically said we have to depreciate everything by the end of this fiscal year because that's when our lease ends. So we're working with them to see if we extend the lease now sooner rather than later, if we can kind of extend that depreciation schedule back out to what it would have been, which would have been for another, I think, 3 years after this year. So right now, the way it sits in the forecast, it is causing kind of a disproportionate amount of depreciation compared to what we usually see in a normal year. So it's about $60,000 worth of depreciation. So if we were to reduce that, if we are able to change the schedule, this $20,000 or roughly $22,000 deficit in terms of the operating income would become positive.
I have a question on that, Liz.
Yeah.
It seems to me that we just moved or updated our corporate office and put a good bit of resource into that facility, and that enrollment is stable or a little less, and it's in a great location. It took us a long time to find that. And so with less than a year left on the lease, it would seem to me that we want to get on that right away. Is there a reason we wouldn't be doing that? And I can't imagine with a commercial building is going to want to lose a steady tenant right now.
Right. So this lease is for the North Valley Resource Center, which is the one that we've been in for, I think it's 5 years now. This is our 5th year. So right?
Yeah, it is a good location.
Right. Yes, it is a very good location.
Yeah.
And we do plan to extend the lease. The question is just whether the auditors and the audit guidelines will allow us to change the depreciation schedule, after it has sort of already been taking effect month to month.
My comment is only that lease expires in less than a year, and we should be in negotiations now. You don't want to be up against any wall, and people with tenants in commercial buildings that want to extend leases are in a catbird seat. People are losing, commercial vacancies are going way up, especially up there. And so I would think this is an excellent time to be renegotiating that lease, and staff should be spending time on it, is my point.
We'll do. And we do have an option in our lease to extend. So I think it should be fairly straightforward. I don't think there should be too much negotiation involved.
Well, I think we should be negotiating a discounted rate, perhaps. I don't think we should extend the lease as it says, is what I'm saying. I think
agree.
to have a commercial tenant that is a good paying tenant and a stable tenant is gold these days. I think we should be renegotiating all of our leases that have less than 2 years on them. I'd ask Board Member Holmes, do you have any thoughts on that? You're in that business a little bit.
You know, I guess my comment is I don't know where we are, what the market is in those places. So I think before we extend, we ought to just, you know, find out kind of what things are going for now, if they are. I think it's a good point that you make, Jim, that, you know, there are a lot more vacancies, and so there may be some room for negotiation. I don't think we want to move any sites right now,
No.
or at all, but I think we got to at least ask the question and see, you know, don't just agree to it, but actually have the conversation, saying, you know, something, hey, what do you think about extending our lease for 3 or 4 years at, you know, at market rates? Because if rates had gone up when we go to extend, they're going to want to increase. So we would ask for the same thing, right?
Right. Okay. Any other comments on that, board members?
Yeah.
Hi, Steve.
Yes, I think we might also want to engage in a tenant's representative to help us out with this, a broker who can help us with just evaluating all 4 leases or 5, whatever we have.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a good suggestion. Any
That's a
other?
really good suggestion.
Okay, Liz, continue. Thanks for letting us have that line of dialogue.
Of course, thank you. No, that's very, very helpful guidance. Okay, so the last bullet, PPP loan. Obviously, there's still a lot in the air. I know that there have been a lot of changes, which we'll talk about on the next slide, to the PPP loan criteria and forgiveness and things like that. But in this current forecast, the PPP is still treated as a loan because we have not finalized the forgiveness amounts and things like that with our lender yet. So the current forecast includes payments on the principal and interest beginning in November of 2020, which is when they would start if we were to receive no forgiveness. So depending on what happens with that, if we get all of the money forgiven, it ends up, kind of shifting from loan status to revenue, and then it would also influence the cash forecast because we wouldn't have to be paying those, those loan payments starting in November. So depending on how all these things shake out, it could result in some meaningful increases to our operating incomes for the forecast this year.
And
Is
when
there a
are we
loan?
supposed to? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Is there a loan payment on our current budget for this?
Yes.
How much is it?
Well, here, let me go to the next slide here.
You're asking about the PPP loan payment, Tom?
Yeah, I just wonder if we have an expense that might go away.
Yeah, so it's not actually booked as an expense because it's a loan, so it kind of goes on both the assets and liability side.
Right.
But in terms of the interest and things like that, that would go away. And then in terms of the cash, that would also if we don't have to make those payments starting in November, that would definitely help the cash forecast.
But the current
And Jana, did you?
Yeah, what was it? But what would be our, lack of a better term, liability currently without knowing what's going to happen?
So here are the interest is the only real expense
Right.
associated with this, and it's about a little over $9,000
Okay.
was forecasted for this year.
Got it.
And then in our updated forecast, it is a little over $5,000, and that's partially related to the changing criteria of the PPP loan.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And Jana, did you also have a question?
Oh, I was just asking for the board's sake when we were supposed to find out about how that can be booked and whether it's a loan or it's a.
So we do have to. It is a loan currently, and so it is booked as a
Whether it's
loan.
forgiven.
And it would only change, or the status of that would potentially change to revenue, or a portion of it would change to revenue after we finalize forgiveness with the lender. So Bank of America, as our lender, has not sent us the paperwork that we need to complete to determine our forgiveness yet. So I think since they're a larger lender and there have been some changes that are actually still pending as well, like with the HEALS Act, that they're kind of waiting to see how it all shakes out before they start finalizing forgiveness.
I knew that.
About
I just wanted to ask for
how
the
much did
board.
we get? 800,000 or?
It was originally, they changed the amount. It ended up being about 800,000.
Okay.
Okay, so when we first applied for the PPP, we did have a different set of criteria, so those have already changed. So for example, 75% of the funds needed to be spent on payroll and certain qualifying expenses, such as benefits, and that has since been lowered to 60%. The loan terms have also changed, although depending on if the full amount gets forgiven, then that doesn't apply, but the reduced documentation required for forgiveness is also something that we're monitoring closely. There used to be some fairly detailed reports required and substantiation, but it looks like now they're looking at reducing the documentation, especially for the smaller loans that are less than $2 million, to be more streamlined and simplified. So forgiveness may be fairly simple once it all shakes out, since our amount is under that threshold. So, oops, sorry, I went to the wrong slide there. Okay, so our cash forecast for the year, we do see kind of a drop here, and we'll talk about deferrals in just a moment. But I just wanted to note that this also does include those loan payments starting in November. So if we didn't have those to make, then the cash forecast will be slightly higher. It's still, at this point, we are projecting a positive cash balance where we won't need to utilize any financing, any short-term, cash financing options, but obviously things can fluctuate, so we'll be monitoring this definitely very closely. One of the, it keeps going to the wrong slide. Okay, so one of the main factors influencing the cash forecast is the deferrals. So it ends up being a significant portion, like a quarter to a third of our general state funding for the year that gets deferred. We have a slide here from our previous board meeting that shows these starting in February. And they kind of get the deferrals increase, so more and more of our apportionments are withheld as we get through the end of the year in June. And the color coding shows when each apportionment is expected to be paid back. So the June apportionment gets paid in July, the deferral on the May apportionment gets paid back in August, and so on. So it kind of extends out. So with this, obviously, starting in February is fairly early. So that's a main factor in this drop off here. At this point, it looks like we will be able to weather it. The PPP definitely has allowed us to do that. So it is, in addition to already having needed that cash in our account, it will continue to be something crucial for us in terms of cash management. Cash management options, solutions, we do have some just sort of internal things that we've utilized fairly successfully in the past regarding timing payables and coming to payment plan agreements with some of our larger vendors that can help us, just kind of weather the cash flow storm when it happens, if it's a short-term need. And then if we need to, we can utilize factoring agreements, receivable sales with organizations that do that, as we have done a few times in the past. In terms of more long-term cash flow needs, you've probably heard we've discussed a little bit about the revenue anticipation notes. This is the RAN/TRAN options that school districts and county offices have had access to for years, but in the past, charter schools have not really had access to these. But there are some changes being made where charter schools can now utilize these if needed. They are looking like in terms of, when you compare the costs associated and the fees and things like that, they are more of a long-term cash flow option. So at this point, I don't think we will need to utilize these. And we've discussed with EdTech as well. And as our back office provider, they have, kind of said that they don't anticipate, at least with the current forecast, that we would need to utilize those. Any questions on cash flow? Okay. So just to sum up, obviously we're still closing out the final fiscal year 20 audit and things like that. Thankfully, PPP has boosted our cash balance so that we've been able to sort of weather the COVID storm so far, which has been great. And then, in the future, we need to figure out what forgiveness looks like with that and what we can do with Bank of America, and just kind of also keep looking forward to COVID. We know that things are going to be in flux for a while. We have 4 different counties, to monitor the public health restrictions and everything, and see when our resource centers will be able to open again. And we do expect, there may be, sort of some situations where schools open and close. Hopefully we won't be, kind of going back and forth too much, but the costs associated with that might be a little bit sticky. So we will definitely bring updates to you with every board meeting for that.
I want to mention the accomplishments. It's a reminder how well you guys have done, and having a strong fund balance means that it provides kind of a resource, plus the PPP obviously, but retaining that gives us some flexibility and doesn't scare the crap out of us when these issues come up. So congratulations on keeping that going, and a reminder that we got to keep doing it as well in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Halverson.
Thank you. Any other questions or?
Yeah, I would just echo that. I appreciate those comments. And Ms. Gaskell, when you get into your report, which is coming up here, I would like you to speak to your thoughts on when we would open sites, because I do think the opening and closing of sites back and forth is silly. And so I do think we should have some kind of metric as to that we're further along in the colors or something. So if you slide backwards, you're not closing, you're still. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that when you get to your report. Thanks.
Sure.
Oh, I have one thing, Liz. On expenses, you're going to get to the budget, I guess, here, but on expenses, are the pay increases already included?
Yes.
Yep.
We're looking really
is,
strong. Good job.
Yes.
We're looking
Let
really
me just show you. That's this part right here, this 157,000 was that update to the expense forecast for the staffing and compensation plan that the board passed in August.
Well, that's all expenses we know about, insurance and medical insurance and all that stuff. Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
Was the compensation plan received well?
Yes.
Yes, it was received very well, and we put in the message to staff that how much you all deliberated and the things you considered, and that you were very happy to be able to do that for everyone.
Great. Okay, any other questions from board members on the financial update? There's no action. Any other questions? Okay, well then we'll move to our executive director report. Ms. Gaskell.
Great. Thank you, board members. Good to see you all. And Dr. Smith, it's very good that you are joining us. I was kicked off earlier, so I didn't get a chance to say hello. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
All right. Liz, you can change to the next slide, please. I'm just going to give some brief reviews about program and some changes to staffing, which changed once again as of 6:30 last night. which is not reflected in here. Our Riverside Facility update, which is looking very positive, although there are some glitches and some more additional expenses we weren't expecting. And our wonderful CTE grants that we were able to submit last week. We got 4 of them submitted, so I will talk a little bit about that. I did announce to all of the families and the staff that all centers will be closed through October 30th. Currently, the only site, the only county that is in the red as opposed to the purple or whatever they're referring to the colors as, the good versus the ugliest, is San Diego, that county. They did expect San Diego County to actually go back into the ugly color. So there was these endless messages back and forth about if you were already open, then you could stay open, even if it goes back to the ugly color. But if you hadn't opened because you were taking your time to come up with a plan, then you can't open if it goes back to the ugly color. I mean, it was crazy. And I can only imagine being a large district or even a semi-large district in San Diego County, how that was just incredibly confusing. And I just said, forget it. We're just going to stay closed. I did talk to staff and their willingness to be able to want to come to campus and serve the kids. And they were scared. You know, they're very, very scared. There are no other counties that are borderline right now, as from what the county superintendents are sharing with me. We are clearly in the deep purple no-go. So we are closed through October 30th minimum. And we will not consider going into any other change in status until the county, and this is sort of our internal measurement. I have not announced this to the families yet, but our internal measurement until a county is at least 3 weeks into their positive color, because of exactly what you just said, Chairman Lewis. We don't want to be going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And different counties are actually applying these guidelines differently. So it makes it hard for families to plan. It makes it even harder for staff to plan. So
further on that, Jana, I think that while you can apply for a waiver at red, I don't know that we should. I think we should wait till even orange. And so, because that allows you to slide backwards and still remain open. So, and I think that we should wait to see what some of the other schools are doing. But I think at that point, it would be helpful for you to consult the board. But I wouldn't consider it till orange. I think that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, even I was being even a little bit more liberal, but I appreciate that that is your stance. And if the rest of the board agrees on that guidance for me, I appreciate that very much. And I know the staff will as well. We have the only waiver that can be applied for is for elementary, and I wouldn't do that without the 6th through 12th grade programs being able to be in the same status as everyone else. So we've never considered applying for a waiver. We were just waiting for the okay color to be able to do any face-to-face. In the meantime, and Liz, I think I'm gonna pull it up myself here because it's your screen isn't showing, but I have it on my computer. So in the meantime, however, we are allowing, following the California Department of Public Health and our county guidelines on small groups being able to meet and the guidance that they have given us. And that is only for special populations, and those special populations include homeless, low income, special education, as far as we're treating it for assessments, foster students, and low income students. Only those that are currently at risk of learning loss is what we are applying the guidance as for these small groups. And in our case, it's not really small groups, it's one-on-one. If we have students that are struggling because they are in any of these special populations as outlined also in our LCP, then we do have some staff meeting with them. Right now, no one either family-wise, student-wise, or teacher-wise has asked to meet to get that help, because our teachers are just being so incredibly successful in meeting with the families online, face-to-face, video conferencing, the workshops that we have implemented. We have a workshop in every single one of the core courses that we offer that kids can attend and get help in. We will move in block 2, which is coming up. As you know, we're on these mini blocks. We will move into block 2 with more of the fun stuff, the fluffier stuff, now that we have kids used to attending our workshops to get the help that they need in their core academics online. We're going to be adding some more fun workshops, clubs, that kind of thing that really keeps our kids happy and engaging in this block 2. So it's so successful at this point that we haven't had anybody request to have any kind of face-to-face on-site experience. We are, however, doing some special education face-to-face in special cases, and also we are continuing with some of our assessments that are required under special education at the school sites. For that, we have the face shields for the staff that are meeting with the students face-to-face. That does not preclude them from wearing a mask as well. And Liz just ordered, per Tracy Williams, our Director of Special Education's request, these partitions, the plexiglass partitions for the kids to sit behind, because it's really hard to assess kids from 6 feet away. And that's still what you're supposed to be if you only have the face shield and a face mask on. So Liz just ordered some of those plexiglass partitions for the students to sit behind so that the special education, education psychologists and service providers can meet with the kids. So we do have some people on campus, is my point. It's very, very, very minimal. And as I mentioned in the last board meeting, we have them, obviously attesting to not having been in contact, attesting to not having had any symptoms. We're taking their temperatures, and they're having to write their temperatures down every time they walk in the door. Every single employee, every single student, every single parent, every single time they step foot on campus. So there is some pending legislation that will require us to broaden these requirements for tracking on site through 2023. I'm not following it right now. I'm just going to wait until it happens. I don't know where it stands at this point, but I know it is pending as I get my legislative updates on a weekly basis. So that'll be really interesting. I think it is being edited, given our inside scoop that we have on some of the changes. But 2023, they will have us be doing a very, very, very close monitoring of any person that steps on the campus, including like UPS delivery people. So it'll be interesting. Any questions about program? Our workshop schedules, our workshops have been great. I think Lindsay did some incredible videos for kids and easy access to the workshops. And so we're pretty excited about that. Any questions? All right.
And just one more quick question. So I apologize. I was having an issue with my screen sharing. I think I've sorted it out. Can you all see the program slide well now? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
And Jana, I want to reinforce what Jim said about reopening. I'd be more conservative than liberal on this one. And we don't want things being changed right and left. We want to make sure it's fairly stable, and then we can reopen. So I'd lean more toward waiting than initiating action.
I appreciate that, board, and I know staff would too. Was someone the thing that's even scarier, Dr. Halverson, and any other board members that feel the same way about this, is once you were open, you were allowed to stay open per the guidelines from CDE and the CDPH, even if the color changed, which is scarier to me. I think reopening could cause the colors to change, obviously, in large districts. So you were allowed to stay open once you were open, even if the color changed. And that really made staff and families uneasy. We did a survey as part of our LCP, and less than half of the families would actually start attending the resource center if we were to open in the near future. Less than half. And that's less than half of the half that would normally attend. So, so I really appreciate everyone's guidance on that, and I will definitely follow up. As far as staffing is concerned, we are hiring now 2 more teachers. We had a teacher resign 6:30 last night. So we are hiring 2 new teachers at Pivot North Bay. One was elementary. As I mentioned at the last board meeting, our elementary program has kind of boomed. And so we were going to hire an elementary school teacher that would be able to take some of the overflow. And we already currently have a teacher at North Bay who is a middle school teacher and multiple subject credentialed, serving elementary. And if we hire this elementary school teacher, he will be able to take on more middle school kids at North Bay, and we'll be able to kind of balance out the caseloads more. Now we will also have to replace the teacher that resigned last night, which was a brand new teacher. And she was just really struggling with the systems and the technology. I know you've heard me say it before, but there are a lot of systems at Pivot. And she was offered a position elsewhere. So we will be hiring there. We are also hiring a grader that will be assigned strictly to North Bay. They have a lot of grading with 460 kids or so. And so one of the reasons for this, obviously, as Liz showed you earlier, we do need to spend money at North Bay given the SB 740 requirements. We need to not have as big of a ending fund balance and a reserve. So we are going to do it to support the students first and foremost. And we will also be increasing the hours of our math tutor or hiring additional math tutors because it's really working out well for all of our students to get that support in math, the additional support in math as needed per our test scores in the past. So any questions on staffing to anybody?
Yes, I do on elementary education, and it's probably due to my feeble memory. But I want to say that in a recent meeting, we were talking about reducing elementary education because we didn't have enough students. Was that site specific? What am I remembering or misremembering?
For the last 2 years, our elementary, and it's a great question, Stephen, I'm glad you asked it. For the last 2 years, our elementary population has not increased, and it wasn't high to begin with. And then this year, boom, we discussed at the last board meeting that perhaps some of these families will not be returning in a year if COVID goes away or if mask rules go away, because that is a concern of a lot of elementary parents. And we will plan accordingly, because a multiple subject, we actually put in the ad for the elementary school teacher preference will be given to teachers who have middle school experience. Depending on the assignment that a teacher has, they actually, the same credential could be used for middle school and elementary, a multiple subject teaching credential, so that we could use this person in the future if the elementary population goes down at different grade levels successfully. We're allowed to use any credential for any grade levels, but that's not the best practice. So it has just boomed because of COVID, and we know that we might lose them. I do think, and we mentioned this last time, just to remind everybody, I do think that more will stay in some cases, because I do believe there is movement for any, immunizations is an issue with a lot of people and not wanting to have little ones immunized. And there is movement already to have the COVID vaccine be part of the immunization requirements. It's not a law, obviously, because it doesn't exist yet, but I do see that happening. And I do think some families will not want to do that. So I think, there's a good chance that while we will lose some, if all school sites open up for all-day programs 5 days a week in their local districts, that we will keep some for all of those reasons. So, but yeah, it was a shocker to us. It was a shocker. And, in Riverside, with our new facility and the huge space that we will have for elementary and the stations we're able to create and everything, we're pretty excited actually to have 35 kids. So all right, on to the Riverside facility. I mentioned last time that there was a pump that had to be installed. We had to have new electrical and new plumbing design. It's going to cost another 10 grand. I'm working with the landlord on that. It really is because of requirements of the school, though, so I'm pretty sure that's going to be on us. There's a few other things that I'm pushing back on the landlord to help us with that we believe is within our lease with them that should be on them, including the new fire requirement. It's a system that is outside of our suite and is actually for the entire building that our suite is in, that the city is now requiring. It's not the alarm thing that we submitted early for to avoid the changes 2 years ago. It is a whole different requirement. And so the landlord is pushing back a little bit, so we're having good negotiations. I will reach out to the facilities committee if those negotiations don't go well, which they're going fairly well. We have obviously fixed the mold issue. The landlord paid for all of that. There is some warping in the, they didn't replace the drywall, and the landlord needs to replace the drywall because the mold issue was on them. And so again, they have agreed to do that, but it did take a little prodding on my part, but they've been working with us very well. So we just submitted the redesign for the new pump to the city. That's a little bit of a time sucker because they're going to have to review it. Hopefully they will come back with the okay on it. It just got resubmitted on Monday. I gave my approval for it. We just got the plans on Friday of last week. So, you know, a few little delays here and there, but it's starting to look good. And I know, Mr. Chairman Lewis, you were going to swing by sometime in early October to see the progress. I think that would be awesome. It would be a perfect time for you to do that. I would appreciate that.
Yeah, I could come down on a Thursday evening instead of I have a meeting down in LA area on Friday afternoon, so I could come by Thursday evening and see it Friday morning, October, I think it's 8th or 9th. So I'll work with you on that.
Perfect. That would be great. That would be awesome. Any questions on the Riverside facility? It's moving along better than it was.
Remind us again, the completion date expected?
We just talked about it this week because so much was hung up on the pump project and the mold. And we're looking at probably end of November, beginning of December. That's best case scenario. I think we'll definitely be moved in by the first of the year with everything moved. So now that we have that date in mind, we have to negotiate an extension on our current lease. But as you all know, many of these retail centers are struggling, and so I don't see a problem with that. And he knows that. We've been talking about it for a year and a half now. So.
Yeah.
And the furniture company is waiting patiently. We gave them a deposit 2 years ago, waiting patiently, and they're waiting for that date to move in. That'll probably be early December, end of November, early December for them to move build all the furniture. As you know, it's all built right there on the spot, put into the facility. So.
Have you checked in with them on production timelines? Because as we'd heard about the computers earlier, everything is taking so long. We actually realized even for our police cars, which are our Dodge vehicles, we have to order them now for an April delivery. That's
wow.
That's how far out just things aren't. And so all these durable goods you think you're going to have, you're not. So just make sure you're checking on those as well. They may not be as available.
Yeah, absolutely. Liz, Bill, and I have been working really closely with them on that. They actually have been storing all of the pieces parts for like a year and a half for us. So they have most of them now, and I'm getting a little frustrated having to store them. I don't blame them.
Questions about the Riverside site while we have a pause for Jana so she can catch her breath?
None here.
Sounds like it's going better now that it finally got going, so that's good. Okay. Go ahead, Jana. Thanks.
So the career technical education, as you all have put into our strategic plan for the last 2 years, we really have wanted to focus on this. We've tried various routes to get it up and running. A big part of the challenge is staffing and having the calories to spend on writing grants and whatnot. You approved our consultant's contract at the last board meeting with one change, and she has sent that to me. And she did a great job, albeit we were all kind of rushing at the end, but that's always the way grants work. Liz was incredibly helpful in building the budgets and working with our consultant on that. And we got 6 grants submitted. We got agriculture, construction, and business. We have staff that already qualify for the CTE credentials. And we're talking about a possible planning grant for the medical CTE, at least in Southern Cal. In our Riverside and our San Diego facilities, and probably also the Northern Cal, but we'll see about those. So I'm really excited about that. We'll know in December, probably a little bit earlier than that. The money comes in December, actually. So, and as Liz mentioned earlier, it's this first round of grants. We're submitting a few others, but this first round of grants is really going to be dependent on how many other people submitted grants. So either people have a lot of time on their hands and lots of people submitted and we'll only get a little bit of money, or people are really crazed right now and not many people submitted and we'll get more money. And I'm thinking it's going to be the latter. So I'm very excited that we're finally getting some money behind our CTE program. So, here's just sort of a rough estimate. This is, like I just said, it's talcum powder. We have no idea how much we're going to get. So. None of this is in the budget, as Liz mentioned earlier. And that is my executive director report. Questions?
Any questions of board members? It's a good update on things.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Continue to claw away at progress. That's good. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, if that's a report, we'll move on then to our action items. Item 4.1 is a ratification of the unaudited actuals for each of our sites, 4.1, 0.2, 0.3, and 0.4. Liz, you provided a good staff report. Really interesting to see. I know we've got Smith on the line. We're pleased to stand up to your requirements. They're very thorough. You definitely do a good job over there, and it was really interesting to see. But Liz, good job on making sure we're continuing to meet the Riverside requirements as well. Do you have any other comments, Liz?
No, I don't think so. Just other than we did submit these already as usual due to the timing of our board meetings. We often do a ratification instead of an advance approval here. So this is a ratification, and they were all submitted on time by the September 15th deadline.
Do you have any questions of board members on the ratification of the unaudited actuals? Okay, hearing none, I'll ask for public comment on this item. And we usually take these items as one vote, but the minutes reflect individual action. But I do want to see if there's any members of the public that would like to comment on items 4.1 to 4.4. Okay, hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the unaudited actuals for all Pivot Charter School sites.
So moved.
So moved.
We're actually
Martell
ratifying. Martell moved, and who seconded?
Ralph Holmes.
Thank you, Board Member Holmes. So the action is moving second to ratify the unadded actuals for all Pivot schools. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Those are approved. It's submitted. Item 5 is our public hearings. These are public hearings to solicit input on the specific actions and expenditures proposed to be included in the 2021 Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan for Pivot Charter School. And these for each of the sites. And so this is, Liz, appreciated the report. This is a new report or metric or exercise that we have to go through in these odd times here related to how we're utilizing our resources. And so do you want to have any further report on that, Liz or Jana?
I did a brief staff report for you, and Lindsay and Liz have attended many meetings on this, and I wrote the reports. Obviously, they are very similar because we're doing all the same things pivot-wide. As you know, we've moved much more towards a pivot-wide model of all instructional delivery, maintaining all the FTEs correctly in our budgets. So I really have to say, and it is an exercise, and it replaces the LCAP, but it really did get us thinking about how we're spending the monies and how we're going to support students that are at risk of learning loss. We do have more students not participating in some instances than in the past. And so our staff are doing such an amazing job. Special ed, general ed, our counselors, our ed psychs, our site coordinators, our site admin, in supporting these kids and checking in on their mental well-being and their emotional status, as well as their academics. Everyone is super stressed. I have to be honest, it's just the way the world is right now. Lots of things going on. The fires and the rolling blackouts didn't help at many of our resources. We did have families lose homes up in Butte County. Again, one of them actually lost it for the second time in 2 years. It's super stressful, and I've never been more proud of all of our staff in how they're meeting the needs of the students. There was a longtime EC the other day that said to me, I'll just say it was Susan Raven that said to Craig the other day, I'm meeting, or Travis, I guess, I am meeting the needs of these kids. I'm making just such meaningful connections like I never thought I would be able to without having a school site to see the kids. And she was just floored, and she's been here for 6 years. And that is the sentiment and the feedback I'm getting from all of our admin teams, everybody is just working really, really hard to support these kids. And these plans are, really reflective of what we're doing. So more so, I'll be honest, than I just think more special care was put into these LCPs. LCAP tends to be a little bit more prescriptive. And these were, what are you really doing with, to support these kids, and we got into detail on it. So hopefully it makes sense to you all what we're doing, and it's really clear to the state what we're doing to serve kids. And I just want to say I'm really proud of our staff.
I really appreciate you saying all that, Jana. You read through this stuff, and as a layperson, you wonder if it was really more than an exercise. I'm glad to hear it was. I'm glad to hear that this caused us to think some things through and validate many things and help us focus on others. So that's good. Other comments from board members? Okay, this is a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing. And this is the time and place for any and all interested persons to speak into the record and solicit input. We're not approving these today, but we are asking for input. So is there any input on any of the LCP plans for any of our sites? The public hearing is now open.
And Chairman Lewis, I also wanted to add that with the public hearing notices that we posted for these, there was an opportunity for the public to submit written feedback to a designated email address for this, as well as they could contact each site if they would like a physical copy or to submit written feedback on paper. And at this time, I'll check the email address right now. There was no official written feedback submitted by either of those means.
Okay. Thank you for pointing that out, Liz. It's a good bit of work. Okay, any comments? Hearing none, then I will close the public hearing. Thank you. This was excellent work. We will meet on Friday, September 25th at 10 a.m. to approve these. Dr. Smith, it's great to have you on board. Thank you for your comment. Really appreciate that. Okay, so with that, I will we'll go to closed session. We're adjourned until 10 a.m. on Friday, September 25th. I will be recording a session for the League of California Cities at that time, Jana. So I know there'll be a brief meeting. I trust there will be a board majority. I know Vice Chairman Harrigan will hopefully be in the meeting and conduct that for us, because I will be recording a session. It's so weird, conferences now. You record your sessions beforehand and then they show. So I apologize for my absence Friday, but I support the work you did, and I would vote to approve them. So with that said, we will adjourn this meeting.